sort of activities in research or in kind of little institutions or centers we as teachers could set up, because we have a lot of dependence on government funding and we look for big funding for research, but there are a lot of teacher initiatives as far as research is also concerned. If we could talk about that for a while.
Well, money is, of course, with all initiatives, unfortunately, a central problem. And perhaps we can briefly look back of what we said before about where do major funds go. And it came from me almost natural as well. Well, of course, to the medical, natural sciences, to the life sciences and so on. My argument, if I may expand a bit here, is of course that they have the better strategies of justifying larger monies they need. We are expensive insofar as what we mainly need is people. People, unfortunately, are relatively expensive. They have the bad habit of sort of eating, drinking, needing clothes, sleeping, and so on.
Needing a hotel room.
Yes, which machines don't normally always have. You buy them and then you look a bit after them. So humanities are not normally or automatically the less expensive ones if you take them seriously. So it's probably also a question of political emphasis and economic consideration, which goes in here. But back to the question, what kinds of initiatives can we think about? And of course, start it slow, begin with sort of grassroots hobby horses you want to ride. And I suppose what helps a lot, it is not the solution, the final solution to all our problems, but what helps a lot are the new, look what we're doing now, media technologies. I do think, especially in a situation as here in Gujarat, where you have excellent educators, an excellent educational system, but still some way to go, developmental potential to spread out the education countrywide to all people who would like to have it. The new media are wonderful. The electronic media, the internet. TV channels, film channels, which you can set up, are a very helpful means where very few people can sort of move a lot of educational clout.
Yeah, and I think in a country like India, which is so vast, if you're talking about research, it sometimes becomes a metropolitan activity. Universities in big metropolitan cities get the funding. They are the ones who have access to funding. And the colleges, the high schools in smaller areas tend to be left out. And this is where if you start disseminating this kind of research, findings of such research, through the internet, through media like this, the way we are talking to you today, instead of this kind of a general talk, if we talk to you about our research findings, people all over Gujarat in the smallest, most distant places would have access to the research which Professor Stierstoffer and I have done in the various joint research projects that we have had and are planning to have. So dissemination of knowledge becomes very, very important. And I think even I think we were talking about our own initiatives as teachers. If we even start very small with, you don't need infrastructure, even if you just start with a desktop computer and through that, if you start disseminating the kind of research that you have done, even that becomes a beginning. I think we need to disseminate research, we need to share research, because in a globalizing world, you can't really work in isolation anymore. And if you do, you might end up duplicating research, and we can't afford to duplicate research. So if we share our resources, either by the kind of exchanges that Professor Stierstoffer and I have had, or sharing it through media like this, or through internet, the reach of our research findings becomes that much wider.
And
what do you think?
And of course, another aspect, we do every one of us spend
Yeah.
a lot of our time writing applications for research funds and things like that, and no harm done, and this is probably also the way it has to be. On the other hand, I must say I have a great enjoyment and sometimes also a great satisfaction in doing something which is not centrally government or educational body funded, in the sense that somebody else is either telling me directly, you do research on peaceful society. Remember, the fundamentalism and literature project became only possible because I could somehow explain to the funding body then that this was somehow helpful for a peaceful society. This is very indirect, and one always has to sort of fit projects in drawers and niches which one may not want to go to. So being one's own master and deciding on research priorities oneself is, I think, something that can easily get lost in the jungle of evaluation, accreditation,
That's right.
and competition for not the best projects. This is perhaps, if I may add, another problem of the German funding system at the moment. We are not really, at the end of the day, competing for the best projects. Because how do you measure the best project? Probably by its results, but what are the results of a humanities project? Publications, and if so, which publications? So very difficult to gauge the success of a project. No, we are measured on the grounds of the thousands or millions of euros, in our case, we are able to come up with at the end of a calendar year. And this, I think, is almost counterproductive in the sense that those people who are the most liberal spenders of money are being prioritized, and not those who are the best and possibly the more economically working researchers.
Yeah, but I think what you said about humanities and the kind of expectations that people who give, or institutions that give us grants for research on humanities, the kind of expectations they have, they want to see results. And in a science project, you see results, they produce something. But as far as the humanities are concerned, we deal with people, we deal with mindsets, we deal with current issues, we deal with peaceful societies, we deal with conflict resolution. And while these kind of results are not easily quantified, they are, if not as important as the results that scientific projects come up with, I think even more important, because this is what we need today. And I think the importance of research in humanities is beginning to strike funding bodies today, strike them a little more than it used to a little earlier. So we do find ourselves with some money for research in our own areas, if not too much. We do get a little more than we used to get. So I think that is a positive sign. And again, we need to look further than our own national shores. We need to look at other countries and try and collaborate with them on our research projects. And I think those kind of fundings are also becoming more and more possible today. So I think this is a positive sign.
Absolutely. I'm not sure. I mean, I'd agree, first of all, that the numbers of and possibilities of international collaboration are probably increasing. On the European side, we have a number of European, as they are called, framework programs. There used to be a very strong initiatives from the European side to link up with India, actually, the Asia Link programs, which unfortunately were, for reasons I do not understand, discontinued, I think 2 or 3 years ago. But I think I can say that certainly our German research funding bodies are very intent on collaboration with Asia and India in particular. I know that my university has, I think, about 28 if I remember correctly, memorandum of agreements with Indian universities and researchers. So India is very much on the agenda in German research.
Yeah, and I think even though the Asia Link research funding has been discontinued, or it is put on the back burner these days, as you have said, there is a new program with the German Academic Exchange Service called A New Passage to India. And I think we are all being encouraged to apply under this New Passage to India program, although they say to us it's for scientific research, but we can, I think, really make a case for being more scientific in our humanities research as well, and try to make a claim for ourselves, because we need, in this globalizing world today, we need to build up not just a national or a regional, but a global network of sharing knowledge. And one can do that only with joint research projects in areas which are of immediate concern to people around the world.
And especially with these Passages of India projects you're talking about, you can see that the sciences, the natural sciences, can sometimes also be very good for us humanities people, because that is an interesting example. This strong interest, economic interest also in India, springing up in Germany, had actually the background that Germany at one point, I suppose, must have been in the mid-90s, discovered that they were running out of IT people. They had simply forgotten to educate enough people in computer sciences.
True.
You know, not only the sort of Microsoft and Apple applications, which everyone could learn, but the more sort of advanced kind of science. And they said, what do we do now? And they heard that Indians, and rightly so, are very good at this. And they decided, wouldn't it be nice to have a lot of exchange with Indians coming into our country and doing the job for us? And so huge funds were made available from that starting point.
The
and
German
then
green
it began
cards.
Indeed. And then it began to spread. And nobody is talking about Indian IT so much anymore, in Germany at least, because it's become acknowledged wisdom that if you want to know something about IT, look to India. But the initiative has spread and had some fringe benefits, at least, for our mutual collaboration.
Yeah. And that, I mean, he was talking about the Indian IT people in Germany, and that brings us to the large number of Indian researchers in various technical fields in Germany. Whenever I visit German universities, I come across a lot of students from Indian IITs and students of computer sciences who are doing their PhDs in Germany, who are doing postdoctoral work in Germany. And I think this is important, not just at the level of the faculty, but at the level of students, to make it possible for students to visit different countries, to have an exchange program, so that they can share knowledge with one another. Because it's only with sharing that you can create new knowledge. And if you don't share, you tend to fossilize. You need to share knowledge.
Yes, I suppose exactly the student level is something we haven't discussed so much, and I'd like to include here the sort of postgraduate, doctoral, and possibly also postdoctoral research level. And I think there's still a huge mutual benefit to be drawn by building up much more extensively exchange programs, which do not have to have the same extent as sort of for a whole year. Ideally, that would be nice, but we could have shorter exchange days, a semester, for instance, teaching stints, as it were, block seminars we could do, because it's not, of course, always in hard-pressed administrative and teaching situations.
Not possible
not
to get
always
away for
possible
a whole
to get away for a whole year or even a semester in some circumstances. So we should try to build very flexible and immediately applicable institutions there. And I think our funding bodies are very willing to support us in that respect.
And going back to our global perspective on education and higher research. How do you see that? How do you see the future of this?
Well, globalization is, of course, or has been with us for quite a while, with the sort of worldwide publication. But you mentioned perhaps one would need to remember or remind of the fact that globalization is not necessarily liberalization. This is perhaps a truism nowadays to say that. Give you an example with my edition in 2006 of the 6-volume Women Writing Home project with Pickering and Chatter in London. They immediately said to me, what's your American volume like? You know, there's a volume for each, for Africa, for India, which I have done, and so on. And they said, who's doing the American volume? I said, why? Well, they said, if the American volume is no good, forget about the project. Because the Americans can't help it, don't blame them. They are the market. With whoever I speak, publishers and so on, if you don't succeed on the American market as a book publisher,
you're a failure.
You're not going to win
Right.
a competition with it. So,
Yeah,
but it doesn't end there. You could say, okay, then the Americans decide what we are going to read. It's not only the Americans. It's actually, in this case, in this specific case, the American librarian. It's the librarian who decides which books are going to go into the university library. So you have to write the right book, which the American librarian is going to buy for his or her university library. And there you see that the old mechanisms, which you would have thought were very typical of a national or even sort of very local situation. Africa is riddled in its publication history with the problem of not having its own publishing presses in the early post-colonial or colonial history. But